But I'll tell you something, the BBC now are embroiled in a second scandal around impartiality. We know that the Panorama show that notoriously went out some time ago featured a doctored clip of Donald Trump on January the 6th, 2021. Well, now a second flagship BBC brand, the Newsnight programme, also broadcast a clip that was misleading in regard to Donald Trump's speech prior to the storming of the Capitol all those years ago. And somebody that was on air at the time on Newsnight, a former advisor to Donald Trump, Mick Mulvaney, called out the misleading nature of the clip in real time on the show. Take a listen.
Your video actually spliced together the presentation. He said, we're going to go down and we're going to cheer on our senators and our House members. And then it actually goes on to say, in some of them we might not be able to. And that line about it, we fight and fight like hell, is actually later in the speech. And yet your video makes it look like those two things came together. That's the type of messaging here that so many people in my country find frustrating, is that it's hard to actually get the facts.
Well, there was almost no response from the presenter at the time, Kirsty Walk, and no response from the corporation in the days, weeks and months after. So this is a second scandal that, of course, has led to an apology from the BBC in regard to Panorama. Have they got to apologise again? Should Donald Trump take the BBC to the cleaners? Let's get the views of the excellent writer and broadcaster, Jonathan Sacerdoti. Good morning, Jonathan.
Morning, Mark.
This is unfortunate, isn't it? Because there are certainly figures at the BBC that tried to characterise the Panorama clip as an isolated incident. Given that it happened on Newsnight 2 years previously, this looks cultural, it looks institutional.
Unfortunate, I think, a case of British understatement. I think it's shocking and scandalous. Yeah. And I'll say, you know, it's not surprising to most people who've got their eyes open, because the BBC's been doing this sort of thing for so long. But what's so bad about it is that in both cases with this Trump speech, there's literally no way they can claim this was a mistake, which they keep trying to do. Because when you edit something, of course it's common to cut out sections. Anyone that's even had any go at editing something on iMovie, like a home video, knows that you can chop a bit out and put the two bits together. But it's very, very basic editing vocabulary that if you want to show you cut out something in the ordinary timeline of things, you put in like a little white flash or a little fade out and fade in. There are so many devices which, you know, educated viewers today now know mean, there's a bit missing there, so this is abridged. They didn't do it. They did the other editing technique, which is you cut to a shot of, say, the crowd listening. And what that does is it tricks our brain into thinking that this was a continuous piece of speech and they're just showing us the crowd reacting. That happened in both cases here with the same speech and for the same reason. Both times they tried to make it look like Donald Trump said in one smooth passage that he was urging those people to go and be violent. And then in the Newsnight case, they cut after that, I'm told, and I saw in that report from the Telegraph, 2 scenes of violence. So it's very clear to me what the particular people doing this were trying to communicate. And it's not enough, actually, that the Director General or the head of news should quit. Who on earth made that edit? Who on earth cleared that edit? Which producer, which editor, which production team cleared all of these things happening? And we know now from those interviews from the Telegraph that it was spotted not just by the guest on air, but the next day it was discussed in the production meeting, because we've heard that graphic designer who spoke to the Telegraph in their podcast. So generally speaking, I think this is more than unfortunate. I think this is scandalous and shocking, and I really think there should be a reckoning here for the BBC, which is constantly actually twisting and pumping out distortions of the news, always according to the same sort of agenda.
Indeed, and it's ironic because there are critics of Donald Trump that take the view he has a case to answer for his remarks on January the 6th, but the BBC have put the kibosh on that by absolutely overtly misrepresenting what he said.
That's absolutely true. You know, this isn't me saying this because I have a particular view on Donald Trump and what happened on January the 6th. Of course, I will have a view on that, like everyone will. The point is that as journalists, our job is always to try to communicate, yes, an abridged or summarised version of the news to the public. We can't expect everyone in the public to necessarily watch absolutely everything. But what we can do is try to be honest about how we put that across. And you're right that when you seem to make some sort of distortion distortion like this, you're going to end up in a situation where people actually are starting to talk more about the news broadcaster and how it twisted the news. And that's why Donald Trump, I think, is well within his rights to decide that he might want to seek some sort of recourse from the BBC for this activity.
It's unfortunate, isn't it, that our national state broadcaster that should represent Britain's interests has created a diplomatic incident.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's certainly easy to create a diplomatic incident with Donald Trump. He's somebody who likes to react to this sort of thing. But I think in this case, it's completely reasonable that he'd want to react to this because, you know, the BBC has done something which no news broadcaster should do. He said that they should apologise, and that did force them to do so under this threat of a legal case. And of course, nobody knows if that was really viable or not. But then to be revealed to have done the same thing again at some interval, in fact, sometime before the case that came out first. So they absolutely should have been aware of this sort of thing. And let me go on to expand it and just say that the other things that were in the Prescott memo that was leaked to the Telegraph included their bias on Israel, their bias on trans issues, their bias in a whole range of different issues. And when it comes to dodgy editing, when it comes to non-sequential editing, as we can call it, they actually did that in that Hamas propaganda documentary as well. We've heard so much about that documentary in relation to the child narrator, quite rightly, who was the son of a Hamas minister, no less, and the BBC had hidden that. But we also know that in that same documentary there was a whole passage with the child who we were told was a volunteer paramedic, like a sort of 10 or 11-year-old, I think he was. So an absurd idea anyway that this child was a paramedic. That whole sequence was captioned with a full-screen image that gave a particular day of the war, and then it proceeded to show what was claiming to be a section showing that child helping out after a particular Israeli airstrike. But during that exact sequence, I noticed that the child had several different hair lengths and several different pairs of shoes on, despite them trying to dress him in the same T-shirt to make it look like a continuous piece of actuality that had taken place during the day. That is, again, exactly the same thing, actually a much worse example. It wasn't the US president, so it didn't get the same level of attention. But the BBC is guilty over and over again of trying to misrepresent things as having happened in a particular order or in a particular day, when they didn't. They did the same to Her late Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II during that famous or infamous moment which ended up in Peter Finch's firing or resignation, when they made it look like she had stormed out of a photo shoot with Annie Lieberman in a sort of diva-ish tantrum, and nothing of the sort had happened. They cut something that happened before the photo shoot and put it after the photo shoot to make it look like Annie Leibovitz had upset her. So once could be an accident, though not really. Twice is bad luck. 3, 4 more times, that looks like a bad and dirty habit. And I would say that the BBC needs absolutely to answer for all of these errors and for all of the many other errors that they make. They're not really, we can't write them off as mistakes and accidents. They really need to look inwards and see why they have these biases and why they keep using these dirty tricks to push them to the public.
Jonathan, I've enjoyed your podcast. What is the full name of your podcast?
It has a really weird name, which is I'm Jonathan Sacerdoti, which happened by accident. I am Jonathan Sacerdoti, but it's a really peculiar name. But people can find it on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple. You can find it anywhere. Or at jonathansacerdoti.com, you can find everything I do, including that podcast. And thanks for appreciating it publicly. I really like that. Thank you.
Well, yeah, because you've had some really absorbing interviews with the likes of Michael Gove, Tommy Robinson. Islam has been discussed, political correctness, the BBC. It really is all-encompassing. I'm Jonathan Sacerdoti is the name of the podcast.
And today we've got one on this very topic with Hadar Seller, who is the co-editor of Camera UK, who's done 10 years or more of investigation into the BBC. So that went out at 9 a.m. this morning. I recommend it to people.
There you go. I'm Jonathan Sacerdoti. Give it a listen, and you can read Jonathan in The Spectator as well. Thank you, Jonathan. We'll catch up in the near future. Writer and broadcaster Jonathan Sacerdoti.